Greetings, dear viewers. You're watching Harry's. We have prepared something special for you today. What if Harry found Salazar Slytherin's secret library and mastered forbidden dark arts? Your likes and subscriptions keep this channel alive. If you enjoy our content, please show your support. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1, The Whispering Walls. Harry's footsteps echoed through the abandoned corridor as he pulled his invisibility cloak tighter around himself. The Marauder's map clutched in one hand, he squinted at the familiar parchment in the dim wan light. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, tracing his finger along a section of the second-floor girls' bathroom. Myrtle's bathroom. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. For weeks now, he'd been noticing something odd on the map, a strange flickering at the edge of the chamber's outline. Sometimes it appeared as a small corridor extending beyond the main chamber, sometimes it vanished completely. At first, he dismissed it as a charming quirk of the map's magic, but after the third night of watching it pulse with possibility, his curiosity got the better of him. It was nearly 2 a.m, and Harry knew he should be sleeping. Sixth year was brutal enough without midnight excursions. But with Voldemort growing stronger, Dumbledore offering cryptic lessons about Tom Riddle's past, and the crushing weight of the prophecy hanging over him, sleep wasn't exactly his friend these days. "I'll just check it out," he'd told himself earlier. "Quick in and out. Nobody will know." Now, standing in front of the sink with its tiny engraved serpent, Harry hesitated. He hadn't been back here since second year, and the memories weren't exactly pleasant. Giant basilisk. Tom Riddle's diary. Ginny nearly dying. Good times. Harry took a deep breath and focused on the snake engraving. "Open," he hissed in Parseltongue, the syllables slipping from his tongue with disturbing ease. The familiar grinding of stone filled the bathroom as the sink sank into the floor, revealing the pipe that led down to the chamber. Harry cast a cushioning charm at the bottom. He'd learned his lesson about magical slides years ago, and jumped. The descent was just as unpleasant as he remembered, the dank smell of the pipes assaulting his nose. He landed with a soft thud on the cushioned ground, surrounded by the small animal bones that carpeted the floor. "Lumos Maxima," he whispered, sending a bright ball of light floating ahead of him. The familiar tunnel stretched before him, still bearing the scars of Ron and Lockhart's disastrous backfiring spell from 4 years ago. Harry moved cautiously through the tunnel, stepping over the shed basilisk skin and finally reaching the ornate door decorated with serpents. "Open," he commanded again, and the snake slithered apart as the wall cracked open. The Chamber of Secrets looked much as he remembered, the long stone walkway, the towering pillars carved with serpents, the gigantic statue of Salazar Slytherin at the far end. What he didn't expect was the smell. Last time, the chamber had reeked of water and stone and basilisk. Now, something else hung in the air. Something like parchment and leather. Like the Hogwarts library, but older, mustier. Harry approached the massive statue of Slytherin, his eyes drawn to the spot where the basilisk had emerged from Slytherin's mouth. The corpse was gone, probably cleared away by Dumbledore after everything that happened, but something felt different about the statue itself. He raised his wand, casting light higher up the statue's face, and noticed a hairline crack running across its left cheek. That definitely hadn't been there before. Curiously, Harry approached the statue's base, examining the crack as it ran downward. It wasn't random damage, it was too precise, curving in a deliberate pattern that reminded him of Parseltongue, Harry murmured, tracing the crack with his fingers. It wasn't a crack at all, but an etching, a serpentine script carved delicately into the stone. Without thinking, Harry pressed his palm against the writing and hissed, "Reveal your secrets, Slytherin." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone beneath his hand grew warm, pulsing with magic that traveled up his arm and settled somewhere behind his sternum. The serpentine text glowed emerald green before the entire section of wall slid silently backward and to the side. "Bloody hell," Harry whispered as cool air rushed past him from the opening. His map hadn't been glitching after all. Beyond the hidden door lay a narrow corridor carved from the same greenish stone as the main chamber. Unlike the imposing grandeur of Slytherin's statue, this passage felt intimate, almost welcoming. The walls were lined with softly glowing orbs that illuminated as Harry approached, then dimmed after he passed, as if conserving their magic. The corridor opened suddenly into a circular room that took Harry's breath away. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of the Gryffindor common room, but every available surface was covered with books, scrolls, artifacts, and what appeared to be magical instruments similar to those in Dumbledore's office. Hermione would lose her mind, Harry muttered, turning slowly to take it all in. Unlike the damp, neglected chamber outside, this room felt preserved, protected. The air was dry and clean, carrying the scent of ancient parchment and something Harry couldn't name, something like lightning before a storm. Magic. Pure, undiluted magic. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, interspersed with glass cases containing objects that pulsed with gentle light. A massive wooden desk dominated the center of the room, its surface clean except for a single book bound in what looked like black dragon hide. Harry approached cautiously, half expecting some magical trap to spring. When nothing happened, he extended a hand toward the book, only to jerk back as the cover suddenly rippled like disturbed water. Symbols appeared on the previously blank cover, forming into words, the fundamental principles of intent magic for the worthy heir of Slytherin. Harry snorted. Well, I'm definitely not that. But his fingers itched to open it anyway. This was Salazar Slytherin's private study, possibly untouched for 1,000 years. Whatever knowledge it contained could help him against Voldemort. Knowledge that even Dumbledore might not have. Throwing caution to the winds, Harry reached for the book and flipped it open. Nothing terrible happened. No alarms, no curses, no ghostly apparitions of Salazar himself appearing to judge Harry's worthiness. Just page after page of elegant handwriting, diagrams, and magical formulas that somehow, impossibly, Harry could read. That's weird, he murmured, running a finger along a paragraph. It wasn't written in English, that much was clear from the strange characters. But his mind processed it anyway, translating it effortlessly. Magic in its purest form responds not to words or wand movements, but to intent. The modern obsession with standardized incantations serves only to limit our potential. The text continued, describing principles of magical theory that Harry had never encountered in any of his classes. According to Slytherin, wizards had gradually restricted their magic through increasingly formalized education, trading raw power for reliability and safety. Harry flipped through the pages, finding practical exercises that promised to reconnect the caster with their magical core, bypassing the limitations of modern spellcasting. It wasn't dark magic as he understood it, there were no sacrifices, no harming others. Just a fundamentally different approach to channeling magical energy. I should tell Hermione about this, he said automatically, then paused. Would she understand? Or would she react with her usual caution about anything outside officially approved curriculum? A soft chime interrupted his thoughts, and Harry nearly jumped out of his skin. His watch, a birthday gift from Sirius he'd found among his godfather's possessions after his death, was alerting him that it was 4 a.m. He'd been in the chamber for nearly 2 hours. Shit, Harry muttered, reluctantly closing the book. He needed to get back before anyone noticed his absence. But he couldn't just leave this discovery unexplored. After a moment's hesitation, Harry pulled his wand and attempted to shrink the book, only for his spell to slide off it like water off a duck's back. Of course it's protected, he sighed. Then he spotted something on the desk, a small leather pouch that he'd missed earlier. Opening it revealed an ornate silver ring bearing the Slytherin crest. Some instinct told Harry it was connected to the library somehow. He slipped the ring into his pocket and took one last look around the room. I'll be back, he promised the silent books, before heading back through the corridor and out to the main chamber. You look like hell, mate, Ron observed cheerfully at breakfast, shoveling eggs into his mouth with his usual enthusiasm. Thanks, Harry replied dryly, nursing a cup of strong tea. He'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep before needing to get up for classes, and his mind was still buzzing with what he'd discovered. "Seriously, Harry, are you feeling all right?" Hermione asked, her forehead creased with concern. "You're not still having those dreams, are you?" Harry shook his head. "Just couldn't sleep. It wasn't exactly a lie. Thinking about stuff." Eloquent as always, she teased, but her smile faded quickly. "You'd tell us if something was wrong, right?" "Course he would," Ron said before Harry could answer. "Pass the kippers, would you?" Harry passed the plate, grateful for Ron's interruption. He wasn't ready to tell them about the chamber yet, not until he understood more about what he'd found. The great hall was filled with the usual breakfast chatter, but Harry found himself oddly aware of the magical currents flowing through the room. Had they always been there, or was he just noticing them now? He could almost see the threads of magic binding the enchanted ceiling, feel the protective wards humming around the castle walls. His contemplation was interrupted by the mail arrival. Hundreds of owls swooped into the hall, delivering letters and packages to students. No owl came for Harry, but he wasn't expecting any. "Oh good, my copy of Advanced Runic Applications finally arrived," Hermione said, taking a thick book from a tired-looking barn owl. "I've been waiting weeks." "Thrilling," Ron mumbled around a mouthful of toast. Harry half listened to their familiar bickering, his mind drifting back to Slytherin's book. One passage had particularly stuck with him: "The wand serves not as the source of power, but as a focus for what already exists within the wizard. Learn to feel your magic without this crutch, and doors will open that others cannot imagine." "We should head to potions," Hermione announced, snapping Harry back to the present. "Slughorn said he'd be covering strength solutions today, and I want to get a good cauldron." Harry nodded, gathering his things. As they walked through the corridors toward the dungeons, he absently fingered the silver ring in his pocket. He hadn't tried it on yet, unsure of what it might do, but he couldn't bring himself to leave it in his dormitory either. Potions with Slughorn was less stressful than it had been with Snape, but Harry found it hard to concentrate. The Half-Blood Prince's textbook sat open before him, its margins filled with clever modifications, but for once Harry wasn't interested in following someone else's instructions. Instead, he found himself wondering what would happen if he applied Slytherin's principles of intent magic to potion making. "Your strength solution should be turning amber now," Slughorn called from the front of the class. "Remember, 3 clockwise stirs after adding the salamander blood, not before." Harry glanced down at his cauldron. The potion was still a murky green, nowhere near the amber color it should be. Without thinking, he closed his eyes and tried to feel the magic in the ingredients, the vital essence of each component and how they wanted to combine. "I need you to strengthen," he thought toward the potion, visualizing what he wanted rather than following the procedure mechanically. A warm sensation flooded through his hand and into the stirring rod. When he opened his eyes, his potion had turned a perfect amber color, even clearer and more vibrant than Hermione's. "My word, Harry!" Slughorn exclaimed, appearing suddenly at his side. "I haven't seen a strength solution this perfect since, well, since your mother was in my class." "Extraordinary intuition, boy." Hermione shot him a suspicious look. "Harry, what did you just do?" "I didn't see you add anything." Harry shrugged, genuinely puzzled himself. "Just concentrated, I guess." "Well, it's better than cheating off that book," she whispered, glancing at the prince's copy. Harry bottled his sample for Slughorn, mind racing. He hadn't used any of the prince's modifications. He'd done something else entirely, something that worked on a level he'd never accessed before. As they packed up their supplies, Harry noticed Draco Malfoy watching him from across the room, a calculating look in his pale eyes. Malfoy had been oddly subdued lately, and Harry suspected he was up to something connected with Voldemort. He'd tried telling Ron and Hermione about his suspicions, but they thought he was obsessing. "Impressive work today, Potter," came a silky voice as they exited the classroom. Theodore Nott, a slender Slytherin boy who rarely spoke to anyone, had fallen into step beside them. "I didn't realize Gryffindors had such instinctive talent. There was something in the way he emphasized, instinctive, that made Harry think Nott had noticed more than just a well-brewed potion. "Thanks," Harry replied cautiously. Nott's dark eyes lingered on him. Magic reveals itself in interesting ways to those who pay attention. Without waiting for a response, he slipped away down a side corridor. "What was that about?" Ron asked, frowning after the Slytherin. "No idea," Harry lied. For the next 3 nights, Harry returned to Slytherin's library, spending hours poring over the books and practicing the strange exercises described in them. The basics were simple enough: meditation techniques to sense his own magical core, visualizations to direct energy without formal spells, breathing patterns that synchronized with magical rhythms. What wasn't simple was the effect these exercises had. By the 3rd night, Harry could feel his magic constantly, a living force flowing through his body and responding to his thoughts. Ordinary spells became almost trivial, requiring barely a whisper instead of clear incantations. More impressively, he found he could accomplish simple magical tasks, summoning objects, lighting candles, even transfiguring small items, with just focused intent. On the 4th night, Harry finally tried on Slytherin's ring. The moment it slid onto his finger, the library seemed to shift around him. Books that had been locked in glass cases opened themselves. Scrolls floated from high shelves, unfurling before him. It was as though the ring identified him as authorized to access the entire collection. That night, he discovered Slytherin's personal journals, chronicling his falling out with the other founders and his true reasons for leaving Hogwarts. Contrary to popular belief, Slytherin hadn't abandoned the school because of blood purity disagreements. At least, that wasn't the primary reason. The deeper conflict had been about magical education itself. Slytherin believed in teaching students to connect directly with their magical cores, while the others, particularly Ravenclaw, advocated for a more structured, theoretical approach that Slytherin felt would ultimately weaken wizardkind. "They fear what they cannot control," Slytherin had written. "In standardizing magic, they render it safe but diminished. I cannot be party to crippling the potential of generations to come." The chamber hadn't been built just to house a basilisk, that was merely its guardian. Its true purpose was to preserve magical knowledge that Slytherin believed would eventually be suppressed or forgotten. And now that knowledge was Harry's. "Harry, we need to talk," Hermione cornered him in the common room a week after his first visit to the library. Ron stood behind her, arms crossed and expression unusually serious. "About?" Harry asked, though he knew exactly what was coming. "About whatever you're doing that you're not telling us about," she said, sitting down beside him and lowering her voice. "You've been disappearing at night, you're distracted in classes, and yet somehow you're suddenly performing magic that even I can't get right on the first try." "Yeah, and you haven't mentioned Malfoy being a Death Eater in days," Ron added, as if this was equally concerning. Harry sighed. He'd known he couldn't keep his friends in the dark forever, but he'd hoped for more time to understand what he was learning before trying to explain it. "I found something," he admitted finally. "In the Chamber of Secrets." Hermione's eyes widened. "You went back there? Alone?" "Harry, how could you be so reckless? Stupid?" Harry finished for her, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. "I know what you're going to say, Hermione, but this is different. This is..." He searched for words that might convey the magnitude of his discovery. "This is magic that could help us against Voldemort." Ron flinched slightly at the name but leaned forward. "What kind of magic?" Harry hesitated. "It's hard to explain. It's not dark magic, not exactly. It's older than that, from before those classifications even existed. Slytherin collected knowledge that was being forgotten even in his time, magic that works through direct connection to your magical core rather than through standardized spells." Hermione looked skeptical. "That sounds potentially dangerous, Harry." "If it bypasses the normal safeguards, that's just it," Harry interrupted, feeling a familiar frustration. "The normal safeguards are limitations that were imposed to make magic more controllable, not more powerful. Slytherin believed every witch and wizard had the potential to connect directly with their magic, but the structured education system was designed to prevent that. And you believe that? Hermione asked, her tone making it clear she thought the idea was ridiculous. I don't just believe it, I've experienced it, Harry replied, lowering his voice further and leaning in. Watch. He focused on the quill lying on the table between them, not reaching for his wand. He visualized what he wanted, the quill rising, spinning slowly in the air, and felt the now familiar warm current of magic flowing from his core, through his chest, down his arm, and extending invisibly toward the quill. The feather rose smoothly, hovering a foot above the table and rotating gently as if caught in a miniature whirlwind. Ron's jaw dropped. Blimey, Harry. Hermione stared at the quill, then at Harry's wordless control. That's well beyond Newt-level wandless magic. How are you doing that? Harry let the quill settle gently back onto the table. It's not about power level or academic advancement. It's about approach. Slytherin's library is full of techniques to reconnect with your magical core, to feel and direct your magic through pure intent rather than structured spells. His library? Hermione repeated, latching on to this new information. There's an entire library down there. Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Harry had to smile. Trust Hermione to fixate on the existence of undiscovered books. Yes, a secret chamber behind the main chamber of secrets. It's his personal collection, books, scrolls, artifacts. Some of it is in Parseltongue, but I can read it somehow. Ron looked uncomfortable. Mate, are you sure this stuff is safe? No offense, but the last time one of us got involved with something Slytherin left behind, my sister nearly died. I know, Harry acknowledged. I've been careful. But this isn't like the diary. This isn't Voldemort's magic, it's older, purer somehow. It's about connecting with your own magical essence, not corrupting it. Hermione bit her lip, clearly torn between academic curiosity and caution. Could you show us? The library, I mean. Harry considered this. He'd been protective of his discovery, worried that others might not understand its value or might try to restrict his access. But these were his best friends. If he couldn't trust them, who could he trust? Tomorrow night, he decided. I'll take you both down there. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Harry found it nearly impossible to concentrate in classes, his mind continually drifting back to Slytherin's library and the knowledge waiting there. In Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall had to call his name 3 times before he realized she was asking him a question about switching spells. Sorry, Professor, Harry mumbled, feeling his face heat as the class turned to stare at him. McGonagall's lips thinned. Perhaps you could demonstrate the principle for us, Mr. Potter, since you're clearly occupied with higher matters than mere classroom instruction. Harry nodded, pointing his wand at the hedgehog on his desk that they were meant to transform into a pincushion. Instead of using the incantation, however, he reached for that internal flow of magic, visualizing the transformation he wanted. The hedgehog morphed smoothly into not just a pincushion, but an elaborate silver one with emerald pins arranged in a perfect pattern, far more detailed and elegant than the simple transformation McGonagall had asked for. The classroom fell silent. McGonagall stared at the pincushion, then at Harry, her expression shifting from irritation to something more complex. That was, most impressive, Mr. Potter, she said finally. Though not the standard transformation I requested. See me after class, please. Harry nodded, ignoring the curious looks from his classmates. Beside him, Hermione wore an expression that mingled concern with growing interest. When the bell rang, Harry approached McGonagall's desk as the other students filed out. Mr. Potter, she began, studying him over her square spectacles. That was remarkably advanced transfiguration you just performed. Wordless, with exceptional detail control. May I ask where you learned that technique? Harry shifted uncomfortably. I've been doing some independent study, Professor. Indeed. Her tone made it clear she wasn't satisfied with this explanation. Harry, I've been teaching Transfiguration for longer than you've been alive. What you just did reflects an approach that hasn't been taught at Hogwarts in centuries. It's reminiscent of technique descriptions I've read in theoretical texts from the Founder's era. Harry said nothing, unsure how to respond without revealing too much. McGonagall sighed. I won't pry into your sources, Potter. But I will caution you. Old magic isn't necessarily dark magic, but it can be unpredictable and demanding. It requires discipline and respect. She paused, then added more gently, your mother had a similar intuitive approach to magic, though she arrived at it through different means. Just, be careful. Yes, Professor, Harry replied, surprised by the comparison to his mother. Thank you. As he left the classroom, Harry nearly collided with someone waiting in the corridor, a girl with long black hair and cool blue eyes that regarded him with undisguised curiosity. Sorry, Harry muttered, stepping aside. No harm done, Potter. Her voice was crisp and cultured, with none of the usual hostility he expected from Slytherins. It took him a moment to place her, Daphne Greengrass, a girl in his year who rarely spoke in classes and seemed to avoid the usual Slytherin politics. Instead of continuing on her way, she fell into step beside him. That was an interesting display in Transfiguration. Harry tensed. Just got lucky with the spell. Daphne made a soft sound that might have been amusement. We both know that wasn't luck, Potter. Or a conventional spell. She lowered her voice. That was intent-based transformation. Old magic. Family magic, some might say. Harry stopped walking, turning to face her fully. What do you want, Greengrass? She met his gaze steadily. Information, for now. You found something, haven't you? Something hidden in the castle. What makes you think that? Harry asked, fighting to keep his expression neutral. Because that kind of magic isn't something you stumble upon in the restricted section. It's knowledge that was deliberately suppressed centuries ago. She glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. My family preserved some of those traditions. Not much, just fragments. But enough to recognize when someone else is drawing from the same well. Harry studied her, trying to determine her motives. Daphne Greengrass had never shown any interest in him before, had never been part of Malfoy's gang tormenting him, had simply existed on the periphery of his awareness as that quiet Slytherin girl. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. Because you're changing, Potter. The magic you're using is changing you. And when that happens, it's good to have someone who understands what you're going through. She pulled a small green book from her bag and handed it to him. This might help. It's a journal from my great-great-grandmother about her experiences with core magic. Harry took the book cautiously. Thanks, I think. But I still don't understand why you're helping me. Daphne's lips curved in a slight smile. Let's just say I'm curious to see what happens when a Gryffindor starts channeling the oldest Slytherin magic there is. Besides, she added, her expression growing more serious, there are rumors that the Dark Lord is looking for something similar. If you found it first, that might actually be a good thing, for all of us. With that cryptic statement, she turned and walked away, leaving Harry staring after her with the small green book in his hands. You're sure this is safe? Hermione whispered as they stood in Myrtle's bathroom that night. Ron shifted nervously beside her, his wand clutched tightly in his hand. As safe as anything we do, Harry replied with a shrug. Come on, it'll be fine. I've been down there almost every night this week. He turned to the sink and hissed the command in Parseltongue. Ron and Hermione both flinched at the sound, then watched with wide eyes as the entrance to the chamber opened before them. Ladies first. Ron suggested with a weak grin. Hermione rolled her eyes. Oh, honestly. She cast the cushioning charm at the bottom of the pipe and jumped in without hesitation. Ron and Harry followed quickly, landing beside her in the tunnel below. Hermione was already on her feet, illuminating her wand and looking around with a mixture of academic interest and disgust at the small animal bones crunching beneath their shoes. This way, Harry led them through the tunnel, past the cave-in that Ron had partially cleared years ago, and finally to the ornate door that opened into the main chamber. Hermione gasped as they entered the vast space, taking in the towering pillars and the enormous statue of Salazar Slytherin. "It's both magnificent and horrible," she murmured. "Yeah, real charming interior decorating," Ron muttered. "Very welcoming. Nothing says, 'come on in,' like giant snake statues everywhere." Harry smiled despite himself, appreciating Ron's attempt at humor. "The library's over here." He approached the base of the statue, finding the serpentine script and placing his hand against it. "Reveal your secrets, Slytherin," he hissed. The hidden door slid open, revealing the narrow corridor beyond. "That was Parseltongue again, wasn't it?" Hermione asked, looking uneasy. "Harry, how are we supposed to access this place if we can't speak Parseltongue?" "I've been working on that," Harry replied, pulling out Slytherin's ring. "I think this might allow approved people to enter. Here, try wearing it when you want to come in." Hermione examined the ring cautiously before slipping it onto her finger. It resized immediately to fit her. "Interesting enchantment," she murmured. "Self-adjusting size charm, but I'm sensing identity verification spells too." Harry led them down the corridor and into the circular library. He smiled at their reactions. Ron's mouth fell open in shock, while Hermione looked like she might faint from bibliophile ecstasy. "Holy Merlin," Ron breathed, turning in a slow circle. This is incredible," Hermione finished, already moving toward the nearest bookshelf. "These texts, some of these must be from the Founder's era. Original manuscripts. Harry, do you realize what you've discovered?" "I'm starting to," Harry replied, watching as Hermione reverently touched the spine of an ancient tome. "But most of them are in Parseltongue or other languages I don't recognize." "Not all of them," Hermione said, pulling a book bound in faded red leather from a shelf. "This one's in Old English, difficult, but translatable." She flipped it open carefully. "It seems to be a correspondence between Slytherin and Ravenclaw about magical theory. This is primary source material, Harry. Historians would give their wand arms for this." While Hermione descended into academic rapture, Ron wandered around the room, examining the various artifacts displayed in glass cases. "What's all this stuff?" he asked, pointing to what looked like a collection of silver instruments similar to those in Dumbledore's office. "Magical detection devices, I think," Harry explained, joining him. "That one shows magical auras, see how it's glowing different colors around each of us. And that one seems to measure magical potential somehow. It spins faster the more raw power you channel near it. And you've been studying all this by yourself?" Ron asked, looking impressed despite his obvious reservations. "No wonder you're suddenly acing everything in class." "I've barely scratched the surface," Harry admitted. "There's so much here, and some of it is really advanced. But the basic principles, the connection to your magical core, directing magic through intent rather than rigid spells, that part I'm starting to understand." Hermione had already accumulated a small stack of books that she could read without translation. "We need to be systematic about this," she announced, her initial awe giving way to her natural organizing tendencies. "We should catalog everything, determine which texts are accessible to non-Parselmouths, prioritize practical applications versus theoretical." "Breathe, Hermione," Ron interrupted with a grin. "We've only just got here." "But there's so much to learn," she protested, clutching a particularly ancient-looking scroll. "This could change our understanding of magical history completely." Harry smiled at her enthusiasm but was distracted by a soft sound from behind them, a gentle chime that seemed to come from one of the glass cases he hadn't explored yet. Inside was what appeared to be a small stone basin, similar to a pensieve but made of black obsidian rather than silvery stone. "What's that?" Ron asked, noticing Harry's attention shift. "Not sure," Harry replied, approaching the case. As he neared, the chiming grew louder, and the obsidian surface of the basin began to ripple like disturbed water. Hermione joined them, her academic curiosity piqued. "It seems to be responding to your presence, Harry." Harry opened the case cautiously, half expecting some kind of trap. When nothing happened, he reached for the basin. The moment his fingers touched the smooth black surface, the room around them seemed to shift. A figure materialized beside the basin, a tall, imposing wizard with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing green eyes. He wore robes of emerald and silver, and his face bore a proud, aristocratic expression that somehow seemed familiar to Harry. "Bloody hell," Ron gasped. "Is that Salazar Slytherin?" Hermione whispered, her face pale. The figure regarded them with an expression of mild interest. "I am a memory," it said in a voice that somehow bypassed their ears and spoke directly into their minds. "A guardian left to test those who find my sanctuary. You are not my heir by blood." His gaze fixed on Harry. "Yet you speak the tongue and wear the ring. Curious." Harry swallowed hard. "I'm Harry Potter." "Names mean little to me," the guardian replied dismissively. "Intent and power are what matter. You have been studying my works, using the knowledge I preserved. Show me what you have learned." Harry hesitated, glancing at Ron and Hermione, who both looked equally stunned and uncertain. "It's some kind of magical construct," Hermione whispered. "Like the diary, but different. More like an interactive portrait than a true memory." Harry turned back to the guardian, raising his hand and concentrating. He'd been practicing a particular technique from Slytherin's book, creating light without a wand or incantation, purely through focused intent. A soft golden glow formed in his palm, growing brighter until it illuminated the entire room with warm light. The guardian's expression remained impassive, but Harry thought he detected a flicker of approval in those ancient eyes. Basic elemental manipulation. A beginning, nothing more. What else? Feeling bolder, Harry extinguished the light and instead focused on one of the glass cases across the room. Using the principles he'd studied about extending magical intent beyond the body, he directed his will toward the lock. It clicked open smoothly. "Marginally more impressive," the guardian acknowledged. "But still child's play. True mastery requires not just control of external objects, but transformation of the self." Harry frowned, unsure what this meant. He'd read about self-transfiguration in Slytherin's journals, but hadn't attempted any of those techniques yet. "The serpent form comes easiest to those with the gift of tongue," the guardian continued, as if sensing Harry's confusion. "Feel your magic, let it flow through your body, and visualize the change." "Harry, wait," Hermione began, but Harry was already closing his eyes, reaching for his magical core. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced before, a rushing, flowing feeling that started at his center and rippled outward through every limb. He thought of serpents, of their sinuous movement, their scaled skin, their fluid grace. The magic responded, sweeping through him in a transformative wave. When he opened his eyes, the world had changed. Everything appeared sharper, colors muted but movement heightened. He felt his body, elongated and powerful, muscles working in unfamiliar patterns. "Harry!" Hermione's voice came from far above, and Harry realized he was now much closer to the ground. He transformed into a snake, a large emerald serpent with black markings. "Bloody hell," Ron exclaimed, backing away slightly. "You're an animagus now." "Not precisely," the guardian corrected. "True animagus transformation requires months of preparation and a fixed animal form determined by one's inner nature. This is directed self-transfiguration, more flexible, more immediate, but requiring greater magical control." Harry concentrated again, visualizing his human form, and felt the magic reverse its flow. Within moments, he was standing on two legs again, adjusting his glasses which had somehow remained during the transformation. That was... Harry struggled to find words. "Amazing. It is merely the beginning," the Guardian said. My library contains knowledge that was ancient when Hogwarts was new. Masters of intent magic could change their forms at will, control elements without incantation, heal injuries with a thought, and defend against attacks before they were launched. But why hide this knowledge? Hermione asked, her academic curiosity overcoming her initial fear. Why not share it with all magical students? The Guardian turned his penetrating gaze on her. A fair question, young scholar. The answer lies in both power and responsibility. This magic cannot be standardized or simplified into classroom exercises. It requires innate talent, dedicated practice, and a deep understanding of magical theory. Most importantly, it requires balance, a respect for magic's fundamental nature. Gryffindor and the others feared this approach, Harry said, remembering what he'd read in Slytherin's journals. They thought it was too unpredictable, too closely tied to the caster's emotions. Precisely, the Guardian confirmed. Rowena believed in knowledge through structured study. Godric valued courage over contemplation. Helga feared that some would master these arts while others would struggle, creating inequality. They chose a path that would make magic accessible to more students, even if it meant limiting its ultimate expression. So you created this chamber to preserve what would be lost, Hermione said, understanding dawning on her face. For those worthy to find it, the Guardian agreed. Those with the potential and discipline to master these arts without being consumed by them. And you think that's me? Harry asked skeptically. The Guardian studied him for a long moment. You have begun the journey. Whether you will complete it remains to be seen. But you have shown initiative in seeking knowledge, courage in testing your limits, and loyalty in bringing your companions to share in your discovery. His gaze swept over Ron and Hermione. Qualities that transcend the artificial divisions of houses. With those words, the Guardian began to fade, his form becoming translucent. Return to your studies. When you have mastered the fundamentals, I will appear again to guide you further. As the figure disappeared completely, the three friends stood in stunned silence, processing what had just occurred. Well, Ron said finally, that was properly weird, even by our standards. Hermione was already pulling out parchment and a quill. We need to document everything, he said. This could be our only chance to learn directly from a primary source about the Founder's era. Harry smiled at her predictable response, but his mind was racing with the possibilities that had just opened before him. If what the Guardian said was true, if intent magic really could accomplish all those things, then maybe he had a chance against Voldemort after all. Not just to survive, but to win. We should get back, he said reluctantly, noting the time. It's almost curfew. But we've barely scratched the surface. Hermione protested, gesturing at the thousands of books surrounding them. We'll come back, Harry promised. There's plenty of time. Except there wasn't plenty of time, as they discovered the very next day. Harry was halfway through breakfast when the owl arrived, a sleek ministry bird bearing an official-looking envelope. Similar owls were landing in front of students throughout the hall, causing a wave of confusion and worried murmurs. What now? Ron groaned as Harry opened the letter. Harry scanned the contents quickly, his expression darkening. It's from the ministry. They're implementing educational reforms effective immediately. All students are to submit their wands for inspection and registration. Unauthorized magical practices will be subject to disciplinary action. Special attention will be paid to heritage magic and non-standard casting methods. Let me see that, Hermione said, taking the letter from him. Her face paled as she read. This is outrageous. They can't possibly enforce this. They're going to try, Harry said grimly, looking up at the staff table where the professors were having what appeared to be a heated discussion, several of them holding similar ministry notices. But why now? Ron asked, looking bewildered. What's triggered this? Harry had a sinking feeling he knew exactly what had triggered it. Someone had noticed his changing magical signature, his new abilities. Someone connected to the ministry, or to Voldemort. Across the hall, he caught Daphne Greengrass's eye. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning to whisper something to Theodore not beside her. "We need to be careful," Harry said quietly to Ron and Hermione. "I think they're looking for what we found." "Mr. Potter," came Professor McGonagall's crisp voice from behind them. "The headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately. The password is, acid pops." Harry nodded, exchanging worried glances with his friends before standing to follow McGonagall's instruction. As he left the Great Hall, he noticed Draco Malfoy watching him with an odd expression, not the usual sneer, but something more calculating, almost fearful. Whatever was happening, Harry knew instinctively that it was connected to Slytherin's library and the magic he'd been learning. The knowledge he'd discovered had been hidden for a reason, and now, it seemed, forces were mobilizing to ensure it stayed that way. But Harry had no intention of giving up what he'd found. This magic felt right in a way nothing had before, not just powerful, but natural, as if he was finally connecting with a part of himself that had always been there, waiting to be awakened. If the Ministry wanted to stop him, they'd have to try a lot harder than strongly worded letters and wand inspections. As he headed toward Dumbledore's office, Harry slipped Slytherin's ring onto his finger, drawing comfort from its solid presence. Whatever came next, he wasn't facing it unprepared. Chapter 2, Power and Consequences. The gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office sprang aside as Harry muttered, "Acid pops." His mind raced as he ascended the spiral staircase. Had Dumbledore somehow detected his nighttime visits to the chamber? Or was this about the Ministry letter? He knocked on the heavy wooden door, hearing Dumbledore's calm "Enter" from within. The headmaster wasn't alone. Professor Snape stood by the window, his dark eyes narrowing as Harry entered. Minister for Magic Rufus Scrimgeour occupied one of the chairs facing Dumbledore's desk, looking like an aging lion with his yellowish eyes and tawny hair streaked with grey. "Ah, Harry. Thank you for joining us so promptly," Dumbledore said, his tone pleasant but his eyes lacking their usual twinkle. "I believe you've met Minister Scrimgeour." "Once," Harry replied tersely, remembering their uncomfortable interaction at Christmas. "Mr. Potter," Scrimgeour nodded sharply. "Unusual magical activity has been detected at Hogwarts over the past week. Activity that bears certain, concerning signatures." Harry kept his expression neutral, feeling Snape's gaze boring into him. "Sir. Don't play innocent, Potter," Snape interjected silkily. "You've been exhibiting magical abilities well beyond your previous capabilities. Wordless casting, advanced transfiguration, and energy manipulation that hasn't been part of the Hogwarts curriculum for centuries." Harry's hand instinctively touched Slytherin's ring in his pocket. "I've been studying hard, Professor." "Is that a crime now?" "The Ministry has reason to believe," Scrimgeour continued, ignoring Harry's question, "that someone at Hogwarts has accessed restricted magical knowledge. Knowledge that was purposefully removed from circulation due to its unpredictable and potentially dangerous nature. The new educational decrees are quite specific," Dumbledore observed mildly, sliding the parchment toward Harry. "Paragraph 7 explicitly prohibits intent-based casting without Ministry-approved methodology." Harry's stomach clenched. That description perfectly matched what he'd been learning. "We're conducting a full investigation," Scrimgeour stated. "All students' wands will be examined for traces of unauthorized magical patterns. All areas of the castle will be inspected for hidden repositories of knowledge." "Including the Chamber of Secrets?" Harry asked before he could stop himself. Snape's eyes flashed with triumph. "So you have been there again." "I never said that," Harry backpedaled quickly. "I just wondered if your search would include known hidden areas." "It will include everywhere," Scrimgeour confirmed. "The Ministry takes this very seriously, Potter. You know who is seeking power by any means necessary. We cannot allow ancient, potentially corrupting magic to fall into the wrong hands." Harry bit back a retort about the Ministry's previous year of denial. Instead, he asked, "What exactly is the Ministry afraid of?" "Magic is magic. Some spells are more powerful than others," but, that simplistic view, Snape cut in, demonstrates precisely why students shouldn't dabble in magical theories beyond their comprehension. The magic being detected at Hogwarts isn't just more powerful spells, Potter. It's fundamentally different, drawing directly from a wizard's magical core without the safeguards and limitations that structured spellcasting provides. And why are those limitations necessary? Harry challenged, remembering Slytherin's writings. Because the Ministry wants to control how powerful wizards can become. Scrimgeour's eyes narrowed dangerously. Because without proper structure, magic responds to emotion as much as intent. Anger becomes destruction. Fear becomes chaos. The standardization of magical education exists to protect society, not to limit it. Indeed, Dumbledore interjected, his blue eyes fixing on Harry. It's worth remembering, Harry, that Tom Riddle was also fascinated by magical methodologies that bypass traditional limitations. That comparison stung, and Harry fell silent. "We'll need your cooperation, Potter," Scrimgeour said, standing. "Your wand will be examined along with the others. And if you know anything about unauthorized magical repositories within the castle, now would be the time to disclose that information." Harry met the minister's gaze steadily. "My wand is just a standard wand, Minister. And I don't know anything about magical repositories." It wasn't technically a lie. The chamber wasn't just a repository, it was a sanctuary, a place of learning. And his wand was indeed standard, it was what he could do without it that had changed. Scrimgeour studied him for a moment longer before nodding curtly. "Very well. Professor Snape will collect your wand later today for examination. That will be all for now." Harry turned to leave, but Dumbledore's voice stopped him. "Harry, a moment more, if you please." Scrimgeour and Snape exchanged glances before exiting the office, leaving Harry alone with the headmaster. "Sir?" Harry asked, his defenses still up. Dumbledore sighed, suddenly looking very old. "Harry, I hope you understand the seriousness of this situation. The magic you've been exploring, yes, I am aware of its general nature, if not your specific source, carries risks beyond what you might realize." "How did you know?" Harry asked, more curious than defensive now. "I've observed magical education for over a century, Harry. The signs of a student connecting directly with their magical core are quite distinctive." Dumbledore leaned forward. "It's not the path itself that concerns me. It's where that path might lead without proper guidance." "I have guidance," Harry said, thinking of Slytherin's guardian. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed? From whom, I wonder?" Harry hesitated, torn between trust in Dumbledore and protective instinct toward his discovery. "I can't tell you that, sir. Not yet." The headmaster studied him for a long moment. "Very well. But remember this, Harry, magic, like any power, is shaped by the intentions of its wielder. Your mother understood this, that love could be as powerful a magical force as any dark spell. Whatever you're learning, ensure it serves that which is best in you, not that which is easiest." Harry nodded, struck by the mention of his mother. First McGonagall, now Dumbledore, both suggesting his mother had somehow accessed similar magic without Slytherin's library. "Can I go now, sir?" "Yes," Dumbledore said. "But Harry? Be careful whom you trust with knowledge of your activities. The walls of Hogwarts have ears these days, and not all of them belong to the Ministry. They're going to search the entire castle," Harry whispered urgently as he, Ron, and Hermione huddled in a corner of the library later that day. "We need to protect the chamber." "How?" Ron asked. "It's not like we can move an entire library." Hermione chewed her lip thoughtfully. "The chamber has remained hidden for centuries. Its primary protection is still viable, Parseltongue access. The Ministry doesn't have Parselmouths on staff. But they'll be looking specifically for hidden rooms now," Harry pointed out. "And they have ways of detecting magic. What if they can sense the concentration of ancient spells down there? We need additional protections, Hermione agreed. Harry, what about that guardian? Could it help secure the chamber against intruders? Harry considered this. Maybe. I haven't figured out how to summon it deliberately yet. There you are, came a cool female voice from behind them. Daphne Greengrass approached their table, ignoring the surprised looks from other students at seeing a Slytherin willingly approach the Gryffindor trio. We need to talk, Potter. Privately. Ron frowned. Whatever you have to say, it's fine, Harry interrupted, curious about what Daphne might know. Let's step outside. They found an empty classroom nearby. Harry cast a quick silencing charm on the door, wordlessly, with barely a thought, earning a raised eyebrow from Daphne. You're progressing quickly, she observed. Too quickly. People are noticing. Like the ministry? Harry asked. Daphne nodded. The educational decrees didn't come from nowhere. Someone in Slytherin has been reporting to their parents about strange magical occurrences at school. Specifically, about you. Malfoy, Harry guessed. Actually, no, Daphne replied. Draco's been suspiciously quiet lately. It's Nott's father who's been pressing the ministry hardest for investigation. Theodore Nott's father. The Death Eater. The very same. Daphne perched on a desk, studying Harry with those cool blue eyes. The Nott family has a long history with alternative magical traditions. They recognize what you've been doing because they practice similar arts themselves. Harry processed this information. So the Death Eaters want to find what I've found. That's why the ministry is suddenly interested. Partially, Daphne agreed. But it's more complicated. There are factions within the ministry who genuinely fear this kind of magic becoming widespread. They've been suppressing it for generations, restricting it to Department of Mysteries research and certain old families who preserve the knowledge. Like your family? Harry guessed. A slight smile touched Daphne's lips. My family maintains some traditions, yes. Nothing like what you've discovered, though. What you're accessing is older, purer. How can you tell? Your magical signature is changing, she said simply. To those sensitive to such things, you feel different. Your magic has a resonance now. A depth that wasn't there before. Harry hadn't considered how his magical exploration might be affecting him on levels others could perceive. Is that bad? It's noticeable, Daphne replied carefully. And noticeable is dangerous in current circumstances. She hesitated, then added, Theodore wants to meet with you. The son of the Death Eater who's trying to track me down. Harry laughed incredulously. Why would I agree to that? Because Theo isn't his father, Daphne said sharply. And because he knows things about what you're learning that could help you avoid the worst pitfalls. Harry studied her, trying to discern her motives. Why are you helping me, Greengrass? What's in this for you? Something flashed in her eyes, annoyance, perhaps, or disappointment. Not everyone operates on such transactional terms, Potter. But if you need a reason, try this. The Dark Lord wants to monopolize the kind of power you're discovering. If someone else masters it first, someone who opposes him, that creates possibilities. For whom? For those of us caught in the middle of a war we never chose, she replied evenly. Meet with Theo tonight. Astronomy Tower, midnight. He can help you hide what you're doing from the ministry inspections. She turned to leave, then paused. And Potter? Learn some subtlety. Broadcasting your new abilities in every class isn't the strategy of someone who wants to keep secrets. With that advice, she slipped out of the classroom, leaving Harry with more questions than answers. You can't seriously be considering meeting Nott, Ron said incredulously when Harry relayed the conversation to him and Hermione. It's obviously a trap. They were sitting by the lake, away from curious ears. The afternoon sun glinted off the water as the giant squid lazily waved its tentacles on the surface. I don't think so, Harry replied. Daphne seemed genuinely concerned about the ministry finding the chamber. "Since when are you on a first-name basis with Greengrass?" Ron demanded. "Since she lent me a book about core magic that her great-grandmother wrote," Harry snapped back. "She knows about this stuff, Ron. Her family preserved some of the knowledge that most wizards have forgotten." "I think Harry might be right," Hermione said thoughtfully. "The old pureblood families, especially those with Slytherin connections, would have been most likely to maintain magical traditions that fell out of favor institutionally. See?" Harry gestured toward Hermione. "And if Not knows how to hide magical signatures from ministry detection, that could be crucial right now." "Still doesn't explain why they're helping you," Ron muttered. "Not everyone in Slytherin supports Voldemort," Hermione pointed out. "Some of them might be looking for alternatives, ways to protect themselves without joining either side directly." Harry nodded. "That's basically what Daphne implied. They're caught in the middle and looking for options." Ron still looked skeptical, but he sighed in resignation. "Fine, but you're not meeting Not alone. We're coming with you." "Actually," Hermione interjected, "I think I should try to get into the chamber tonight while the meeting is happening." "What? Why?" both boys asked simultaneously. "Because while the ministry is focused on wand examinations and Harry's activities, I might have a chance to remove some of the most important texts from the chamber for safekeeping," she explained. "Plus, I want to research more about the potential consequences of the magic Harry's learning. Some of the books I glimpsed mentioned physiological changes that occur with prolonged practice." Harry frowned. "What kind of changes?" "I'm not sure yet," Hermione admitted. "That's why I want to research it properly." "Your magic is changing, Harry. We should understand what that might mean for you physically and mentally." Harry ran a hand through his hair, remembering Daphne's comment about his magical signature shifting. "All right. Ron can come with me to meet Not. Hermione, take my invisibility cloak to the chamber. But be careful, we still don't know much about that guardian entity." As they finalized their plans, none of them noticed the beetle resting on a nearby leaf, its antennae twitching attentively. The astronomy tower was deserted when Harry and Ron arrived shortly before midnight. The spring night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky in glittering constellations. "I still think this is a bad idea," Ron muttered, wand ready at his side. "Noted," Harry replied dryly. "Let's just hear what he has to say." They didn't have to wait long. The door to the tower opened, and Theodore Nott stepped out, alone. He was tall and slender with sharp features and calculating dark eyes that took in Harry and Ron's defensive postures with apparent amusement. "Brought back up, Potter. Sensible, I suppose." His voice was softer than Harry expected, almost thoughtful in its cadence. "Your father's trying to get the ministry to arrest me," Harry replied bluntly. "Forgive me for being cautious." Nott leaned against the tower's stone railing. "My father serves the Dark Lord. I serve my own interests. At the moment, those interests align with keeping certain knowledge out of the Dark Lord's hands." "Why should we believe you?" Ron demanded. Nott regarded him coolly. "You shouldn't, necessarily. Believe evidence instead." He reached into his robes and withdrew a small velvet pouch, tossing it to Harry. "Ministry detection protocols. The spells they use to identify magical signatures, particularly ancient ones. I thought you might find it useful, considering your extracurricular studies." Harry caught the pouch, opening it to find a folded parchment covered in intricate magical formulas. "How did you get this?" he asked, scanning the complex diagrams. "My father helped design the protocols," Nott replied simply. "He doesn't realize I have access to his correspondence." "And you're just giving this to us?" Ron asked suspiciously. "With conditions," Nott clarified. "First, I want access to what you found, Potter. Not full access, I'm not foolish enough to expect that level of trust, but enough to continue my own studies." "Studies of what?" Harry asked. The same thing you're exploring. Intent-based magic. Core resonance. The old ways. Nott's eyes gleamed with genuine interest. My family preserved fragments, but nothing comprehensive. What you've discovered is something more, complete. Harry exchanged glances with Ron. And your second condition? A practical demonstration, Nott said, straightening from the railing. I want to see what you've learned. A magical duel, no wands, pure intent casting only. You want to fight? Ron stepped forward protectively. I want to assess, not correct it. There's a difference between reading theory and practical application. I need to know if Potter has actually internalized the principles or is just throwing around raw power. Harry considered the request. A demonstration would reveal his capabilities to Nott, but it would also show Harry how much Nott already knew. That intelligence could be valuable. All right, Harry agreed, ignoring Ron's protest. Basic demonstration only. No harmful spells. Nott nodded, a slight smile playing at his lips. Shall we clear some space? They moved to the center of the tower platform. Ron reluctantly backed away, positioning himself near the door where he could intervene if necessary. Harry and Nott faced each other, both setting their wands aside on the stone railing. Traditional dueling protocols are irrelevant here, Nott said. Intent magic responds to direct will. On the count of 3. Harry nodded, centering himself and connecting with the now familiar flow of his magical core. 1. 2. 3. Nott moved first, a sweeping gesture of his hand sending a rush of wind toward Harry. It wasn't just air, Harry could sense the magic woven through it, designed to disorient and unbalance. Instead of fighting against it, Harry visualized his own magic merging with the air current, redirecting it in a circular motion around himself before sending it back toward Nott with increased intensity. Nott's eyes widened slightly as his own magic returned to him. He dispersed it with a quick slashing motion, then immediately followed with a more complex attack, a shimmering web of energy that expanded toward Harry with binding intent. Harry recognized the pattern from Slytherin's texts, a containment weave meant to restrict both physical movement and magical output. Rather than trying to break it directly, he visualized his magic condensing into a razor-sharp edge, slicing through the approaching web at its weakest junction points. The web collapsed, its severed energy dissipating into the night air. Impressive, Nott acknowledged. You've mastered basic energy manipulation and redirection. Let's try something more challenging. Without warning, Nott closed his eyes in concentration. The air around him began to shimmer with heat as small flames appeared, orbiting his body like miniature stars. With a thrust of both hands, he sent the fireballs hurtling toward Harry in a complex, unpredictable pattern. Harry didn't have time to think, he reacted instinctively, drawing moisture from the night air and forming it into a fluid shield that enveloped him. The fireballs hit the water barrier with angry hisses, creating billows of steam. But Harry didn't stop at defense. Using the steam as cover, he focused on the stone beneath Nott's feet, willing a subtle transformation. The solid surface briefly liquefied, causing Nott to sink an inch before the stone rehardened, trapping his feet. Nott looked down in surprise, then back at Harry with newfound respect. Elemental transfiguration without a wand. Very few wizards can manage that. He placed his palms against the stone, closing his eyes in concentration. Harry felt a surge of magic as Nott freed himself, not by reversing Harry's transfiguration but by temporarily transforming his own feet into something that could phase through solid matter. Bloody hell, Ron muttered from the sidelines. That's not normal magic. No, Nott agreed, brushing stone dust from his robes. It isn't. It's what magic was before it became normalized. He turned to Harry. You've progressed further than I expected, Potter. Wherever you're learning this, the source is exceptional. Harry didn't confirm or deny this, instead asking, how did you learn? You mentioned your family preserved fragments. Nott nodded. The Nott grimoire contains techniques passed down since before Hogwarts was founded. Each generation adds what they discover or rediscovers. It's incomplete, pieces lost to time or ministry confiscations, but the fundamental principles remain. And your father teaches you this? Harry asked, trying to reconcile the Death Eater with this careful transmission of ancient knowledge. My father believes these arts belong exclusively to purebloods, Nott replied, his expression hardening slightly. He serves the Dark Lord because he promises a return to magical traditions unfettered by ministry restrictions or Muggle-inspired limitations. But you don't agree, Harry guessed. Nott studied him for a moment. Magic chooses its wielders based on affinity and understanding, not blood status. History makes that clear enough. The most powerful practitioners of intent magic have appeared in all bloodlines. He paused, then added more quietly, the Dark Lord himself is a half-blood, as I'm sure you know. This frank acknowledgement surprised Harry. Then why is your father helping the ministry track down this magic if he practices it himself? Because the Dark Lord ordered it, Nott said simply. He senses something has changed in the magical fabric around Hogwarts. Something powerful has awakened. He wants it contained until he can claim it for himself. A chill ran down Harry's spine. Voldemort can sense the magic I'm using. Nott flinched slightly at the name but nodded. Not specifically you, not yet. But the ripples you're creating. Those are becoming noticeable to anyone sensitive to magical currents. The Dark Lord is particularly attuned to ancient magic. Harry exchanged worried glances with Ron. If Voldemort could sense the activation of Slytherin's knowledge, it might draw him toward Hogwarts sooner than they were prepared for. The detection protocols, Harry said, refocusing on the parchment Nott had given him. How do we counter them? There are several methods, Nott explained, seeming to appreciate Harry's practical shift. The simplest is magical dampening, spells that create a null field around an area, making it essentially invisible to magical detection. But that's only temporary and can be noticed if someone is specifically looking for dampening effects. What else? Harry pressed. Magical rerouting, Nott continued. Establishing channels that direct detection spells away from what you're hiding. More complex, but also more durable. He gestured to the parchment. The formulas are there, along with the specific detection patterns the ministry uses. With those, you can design appropriate countermeasures. Harry nodded, tucking the parchment into his pocket. And what do you want in return? Beyond this demonstration? Nott's dark eyes studied him intently. When the time comes, and it will come, Potter, I want your word that you'll remember who helped you and who hindered you. That's all. That's surprisingly reasonable, Ron said suspiciously. A thin smile crossed Nott's face. I'm a Slytherin, Weasley. We play the long game. He turned back to Harry. I also want an actual duel. Not this demonstration, but a true test of skill against skill. Once you've had more time to develop your abilities. Why? Harry asked. Because iron sharpens iron, Nott replied. And because I want to know if you're worthy of what you found. Before Harry could respond, the tower door burst open. Hermione rushed in, her face flushed and her hair wild. Harry. The chamber, she stopped abruptly at the sight of Nott. What's happened? Harry demanded, alarm rising at her expression. Hermione glanced uncertainly at Nott before continuing. There's someone else in the chamber. Someone tripped the magical alarms I set. What? Harry's mind raced. The ministry? She shook her head. I don't think so. The wards I placed would have reacted differently to official detection spells. This felt targeted. Deliberate. You should go, Nott said quietly, retrieving his wand from the railing. Deal with your intruder. We can continue our discussion another time. Harry hesitated, torn between suspicion of Nott and the urgent need to protect the chamber. I had nothing to do with this, Nott added, correctly interpreting Harry's hesitation. Contrary to what you might believe, Potter, not everything revolves around your little trio. There are other players in this game. This isn't a game, Harry said sharply. No, not agreed, his expression serious. It's a war. And you'd do well to start thinking of it as one. He nodded toward the door. Go. Protect your discovery. And remember what I told you about the detection protocols. Harry grabbed his own wand, deciding quickly. Ron, go with Hermione to the chamber. I'll be right behind you. But, Ron began. Now, Ron, Harry insisted. I'll catch up in 2 minutes. Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances but hurried from the tower. Once they were gone, Harry turned back to Nott. If this is some kind of setup, it isn't, Nott interrupted. But it does confirm what I suspected. Someone else has noticed what you found. He stepped closer, lowering his voice despite them being alone. Potter, whatever you discovered, whatever repository of knowledge you're accessing, it's changing you. I can see it in your magical aura, in how your power flows. Be careful that you master it before it masters you. With that cryptic warning, Nott departed, leaving Harry alone with his mounting concerns. Harry raced through the corridors under a disillusionment charm, the Marauder's map clutched in his hand. His eyes scanned the parchment frantically, looking for any unfamiliar names near Myrtle's bathroom. To his alarm, he spotted a dot labeled Draco Malfoy hovering in the second-floor corridor, just around the corner from the bathroom entrance. Even more concerning was another name moving through the pipes below, Bellatrix Lestrange. Impossible, Harry muttered. How could Bellatrix be inside Hogwarts? Inside the chamber itself? He reached the second-floor corridor and slowed, approaching cautiously. Malfoy stood near the bathroom entrance, his pale face drawn with tension, wand gripped tightly in his hand. He appeared to be standing guard. Harry considered his options. He needed to get past Malfoy without alerting him, then deal with whoever was in the chamber, whether it was actually Bellatrix or some trick of the map. Making his decision, Harry focused on his magical core, drawing power up and directing it with precision. He visualized a disturbance at the far end of the corridor, a loud crash, as if suits of armor had toppled. The magic flowed from him, manifesting exactly as he'd intended. A tremendous clatter erupted down the hall, causing Malfoy to whirl around, startled. "Who's there?" Malfoy called, moving cautiously toward the noise. Harry seized his chance, slipping past the distracted Slytherin and into the bathroom. Once inside, he quickly hissed the opening command, not waiting for the entrance to fully form before jumping into the pipe. He landed gracefully at the bottom, absorbing the impact through a cushioning charm that activated instinctively with his descent. Drawing his wand more out of habit than necessity, Harry moved swiftly through the tunnel toward the chamber's entrance. As he approached the ornate door with its serpent decorations, Harry could feel something wrong, a disturbance in the magical atmosphere, an intrusion in what had become his sanctuary. He hissed the opening command, steeling himself for whatever waited inside. The chamber looked undisturbed at first glance. The long stone walkway stretched before him, the towering serpent pillars rising to the shadowy ceiling. But Harry could sense a presence, something dark and twisted, its magic grating against his awareness like discordant music. "Ron." "Hermione," he called, scanning the vast space. A soft laugh echoed from the far end of the chamber, near the base of Slytherin's statue. "They can't hear you, Potter." The voice sent ice through Harry's veins. He knew that mocking, sing-song tone all too well. Bellatrix Lestrange stepped out from behind one of the serpent pillars, twirling her wand between her fingers with casual menace. "Your little friends decided to take a nap." Harry's gaze darted past her to where Ron and Hermione lay motionless on the stone floor near the entrance to the hidden library. Fear spiked through him, quickly replaced by cold fury. "What did you do to them?" he demanded, advancing down the walkway, magic gathering around him like a storm. "Relax, baby Potter," Bellatrix cooed. "They're not dead. The Dark Lord wants you to have the honor of watching them die later." Her heavy-lidded eyes glittered with malice. "I'm just here for a little," reconnaissance. How did you get in here? Harry asked, continuing to move forward slowly, trying to position himself between Bellatrix and his friends. How did you get into Hogwarts at all? Bellatrix giggled, the sound echoing disturbingly through the chamber. So many questions. Such curiosity. Her expression hardened suddenly. The same curiosity that led you to things that don't belong to you, The Dark Lord has felt the stirrings of old magic. Magic that rightfully belongs to Slytherin's heir. Voldemort is no more Slytherin's heir than I am, Harry retorted, noting with satisfaction how she flinched at her master's name. He's just a half-blood named Tom who's afraid of death. Rage contorted Bellatrix's features. You dare speak his name? You dare insult his lineage? She raised her wand. Perhaps I should teach you some manners before delivering you to him. Harry didn't give her the chance to cast. Drawing on the techniques he'd been practicing, he channeled his magic through his core and outward, not bothering with his wand or incantations. The stone floor beneath Bellatrix's feet suddenly rippled like water, throwing her off balance. She recovered quickly, surprise flashing across her face before she laughed with disturbing delight. Oh, so that's it. Little Potter's been learning tricks. No wonder my lord could feel the change. She slashed her wand through the air, sending a purple curse streaking toward him. Instead of shielding conventionally, Harry extended his magical senses, feeling the composition of her spell, its intent, its structure. At the last moment, he didn't block but redirected, sending the curse veering into one of the stone pillars, which partially melted on impact. Impressive, Bellatrix acknowledged, circling slowly. But parlor tricks won't save you, Potter. The Dark Lord taught me things you couldn't imagine. She launched into a flurry of attacks, curses flying from her wand with frightening speed and precision. Harry moved with newfound grace, his body responding intuitively to the magical currents around him. Where once he would have ducked or dived physically, now he wove between the spells, his magic extending around him like an extra sense, alerting him to danger before it struck. When a cutting curse came too close to dodge, Harry didn't cast Protego but instead condensed the air before him into a shield of pure magical energy. The curse hit it with a sound like breaking glass, fragmenting into harmless sparks. Bellatrix's eyes widened, genuine concern replacing her manic confidence for the first time. What are you? She whispered. Harry didn't answer. He was done reacting, done defending. Drawing deeply on his magical core, he gathered power until it vibrated through his entire body. The air around him began to shimmer with visible energy, and he felt the now familiar warmth flooding his system. With a thrust of both hands, Harry released a wave of pure magical force. Not a spell, not even a curse, just raw power shaped by iron will. The wave hit Bellatrix before she could fully shield herself, lifting her off her feet and slamming her against Slytherin's statue with bone-jarring force. She crumpled to the ground, her wand clattering across the stone floor. Harry approached cautiously, his magic still swirling around him, ready to strike again if needed. But as he drew closer, Bellatrix's form began to change, shrinking, shifting, the wild black hair shortening and lightening until it wasn't Bellatrix at all, but a young man with white blonde hair. Malfoy? Harry gasped. Draco groaned, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, his body awkwardly sprawled where he'd impacted the statue. P. Potter, he managed, his voice weak. How did you? Nobody can redirect a Caro curse, nobody except. Harry stood over him, confusion warring with anger. Polyjuice potion? You were disguised as Bellatrix. Why? A thin, pained laugh escaped Malfoy. Had to make you show your full power. Had to see. He coughed, wincing. Had to see what you've become. Who sent you? Harry demanded. Voldemort. Malfoy flinched at the name despite his injuries. Nobody sent me. I came on my own, had to know what you found. The Dark Lord senses something powerful awakening. If I could deliver that knowledge to him. You'd save your family, Harry finished, understanding dawning. You're in trouble with him, aren't you? That's why you've been skulking around all year. Fear flashed across Malfoy's face. You don't understand, Potter. He'll kill them if I fail. He'll kill me. Harry's anger didn't fade, but it was tempered now by a complicated mix of emotions. Malfoy had attacked his friends, violated his sanctuary, but he'd done it out of desperation rather than true malice. Where's the real Bellatrix? Harry asked. Not here, Malfoy replied, struggling to sit up. I just borrowed her appearance. Thought it would provoke you more than facing me directly. A bitter smile twisted his lips. Clearly it worked. Harry glanced toward Ron and Hermione, still unconscious. What did you do to them? Just stunning spells, Malfoy assured him quickly. They'll wake with headaches, nothing more. Harry made his decision. With a flick of his hand, not even needing to consciously direct the magic anymore, he bound Malfoy with magical restraints that materialized from the air itself. Hey! Malfoy protested weakly. What are you doing? Making sure you don't try anything else while I help my friends, Harry replied coolly. He turned away, moving quickly to where Ron and Hermione lay. A quick diagnostic spell, another technique from Slytherin's library, confirmed Malfoy was telling the truth. They were simply stunned, not seriously harmed. Harry placed a hand on each of their foreheads, channeling magic with gentle precision to reverse the stunning effects. Hermione stirred first, her eyes fluttering open. Harry, she murmured groggily. What happened? Malfoy happened, Harry replied, helping her sit up as Ron began to wake beside them. He stunned you both when you came in. Malfoy? Ron groaned, rubbing his head. But I saw Bellatrix, Polyjuice, Harry explained briefly. He was testing me, trying to provoke me into showing what I've learned. Hermione's eyes widened as she took in the scene, the partially melted pillar, the scorch marks on the floor, and Malfoy bound against the statue. Harry, what did you do? Defended myself, Harry said simply. And you? She studied his face with concern. Your eyes. What about them? Ron, now fully alert, stared at him. Mate, they're glowing. Like, literally glowing green. Harry blinked in surprise. He hadn't felt any change, but now that they mentioned it, his vision did seem unusually sharp, colors more vibrant than normal. It's probably just residual magic, he said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. It'll fade. Hermione didn't look convinced. Harry, I found something in the library while researching, texts about physical manifestations and practitioners of intensive core magic. Changes to the eyes were specifically mentioned as one of the first signs. Signs of what? Harry asked, helping Ron to his feet. Of magical evolution, she replied carefully. The books described it as the physical body adapting to channel increasingly powerful magical currents. Sounds wicked to me, Ron said, rubbing his sore head. Glowing eyes might help with your intimidation factor. It's not just cosmetic, Ron, Hermione said with exasperation. It indicates fundamental changes to Harry's magical channels. We don't know what other effects might follow. Harry was about to respond when a sound from the hidden library entrance caught their attention. The stone door was sliding open of its own accord. I didn't activate that, Harry said quietly, moving protectively in front of his friends. The Guardian materialized in the doorway, its form more solid than during their previous encounter. The spectral image of Salazar Slytherin regarded the scene with apparent interest, its ageless eyes taking in the bound Malfoy, the battle damage to the chamber, and finally settling on Harry himself. The sanctuary has been violated, the Guardian stated, its voice resonating with power. And you have defended it. With methods both crude and effective. Its gaze lingered on Harry's eyes. The changes begin, as they must. What changes? Harry demanded. What's happening to me? The Guardian moved forward, gliding across the stone floor without leaving footprints. Your magical channels expand to accommodate greater power. The physical form adapts accordingly. It gestured toward Harry's eyes. Enhanced perception is merely the beginning. As you progress, your entire magical system will evolve. Is it dangerous? Hermione asked, stepping forward despite her obvious trepidation. The Guardian regarded her thoughtfully. Knowledge is always dangerous, young scholar. Power even more so. But the danger lies not in the changes themselves, but in how one responds to them. That's not an answer, Harry said, frustration evident in his voice. It is the only answer there can be, the Guardian replied. Those who mastered these arts in my time experienced similar transformations. Some emerged stronger, their magic and will perfectly aligned. Others lost themselves to the power, becoming something neither fully human nor fully magical. A chill ran down Harry's spine. How do I make sure I'm in the first category? Balance, the Guardian said simply. Not just magical balance, but emotional, mental, spiritual. The magic responds to your entire being, not merely your conscious intent. From his position against the statue, Malfoy watched the exchange with unconcealed amazement. Is that actually Salazar Slytherin? He whispered. The Guardian's gaze swept to him. A descendant of the Malfoy line. How predictable. It turned back to Harry. This intruder sought knowledge beyond his understanding. What will you do with him? Harry considered the question seriously. By all rights, he should turn Malfoy over to Dumbledore, explain what had happened. But that would mean revealing the chamber, the library, everything he'd been keeping secret. I'm going to make a deal with him, Harry decided, approaching Malfoy. Aren't I, Draco? Wariness crept into Malfoy's pale eyes. What kind of deal? You tell no one what you saw here today. Not your father, not your Slytherin friends, and certainly not Voldemort. Harry ignored Malfoy's flinch at the name. In return, when the time comes, when you need protection from him, I'll help you and your mother. Surprise replaced wariness in Malfoy's expression. Why would you do that? Harry thought about Dumbledore's words regarding choices, about Slytherin's writings on the nature of power and responsibility. Because I can. And because whatever's between us, I don't want your death on my conscience. For a long moment, Malfoy just stared at him. Then, slowly, he nodded. Deal, Potter. But you don't understand what you're up against. The Dark Lord is a skilled legilimens, I know, Harry interrupted. Which is why you're going to let me place a memory charm on you. Not to erase what happened, but to compartmentalize it. You'll remember making the deal, but the specific details of the magic you saw will be hidden, even from magical extraction. You can do that? Malfoy asked skeptically. Harry glanced at the Guardian, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, Harry said with more confidence than he felt. I can. After receiving reluctant consent, Harry placed his hand on Malfoy's forehead. Drawing on techniques he'd studied in Slytherin's texts about mind magic, he carefully wove a protective layer around the specific memories of Harry's magical abilities, making them inaccessible to external probing while leaving Malfoy's general recollection intact. When he finished, Harry released the magical restraints. Go back to your dormitory, Malfoy. We're done here. Draco stood shakily, touching the cut on his forehead. You've changed, Potter. Whatever you found down here, it's changing you. His voice held a mixture of fear and reluctant respect. I hope you know what you're doing. After Malfoy left, Harry turned back to the Guardian. I need to know more about these changes. What should I expect? How do I control them? The next phase of your training begins now, the Guardian replied. Return tomorrow night, alone. There are texts you must study that address these specific concerns. With that, the spectral figure faded, retreating back into the hidden library. Ron let out a low whistle. Well, that wasn't ominous at all. Hermione was watching Harry with undisguised concern. "Your eyes are still glowing, Harry." "Fainter, but definitely not normal." Harry rubbed his face tiredly. "Let's get out of here. We'll figure this out tomorrow." He glanced around the chamber, at the evidence of the magical battle. "And we need to set stronger protections before the Ministry starts their inspections." As they made their way back toward the exit, Hermione suddenly grabbed Harry's arm. "Wait. I almost forgot, I found something important while researching." She pulled a small black journal from her bag, opening it to a marked page. "This is Slytherin's personal diary from his final year at Hogwarts. There's an entry about a secret vault beneath this chamber, a place where he stored his most powerful artifacts." "Another hidden room?" Ron asked incredulously. "How many secret chambers did one bloke need?" "It's not just another room," Hermione explained excitedly. "According to this, it contains items that amplify intent magic, focuses designed specifically for wandless casting. If the Ministry is going to confiscate our wands, those could be incredibly useful." Harry considered this new information. "Where exactly is this vault supposed to be?" Hermione pointed toward the murky pool of water at the base of Slytherin's statue. "Underwater, apparently. The entry mentions a passage that can only be accessed by someone who has begun the physical transformation associated with advanced practice." Harry looked down at his hands, remembering the Guardian's words about his body adapting to channel greater magical power. "And you think I qualify now?" "Your eyes suggest you might," she replied. "But Harry, the diary also contains warnings. Slytherin wrote that the artifacts are dangerous for practitioners whose will and purpose remain unresolved. Whatever that means." "It means I need to be sure of what I'm doing," Harry interpreted, thinking of his confrontation with Malfoy. He'd had the power to seriously harm his school rival but had chosen a different path. Perhaps that was part of what the Guardian meant by balance. "We can look for this vault tomorrow," Harry decided. "Right now, we need to deal with the Ministry situation. They'll be inspecting wands starting tomorrow." Ron nodded grimly. "Nott's information might help, but we should have backup plans too." "Always," Harry agreed, leading them toward the chamber exit. As they walked, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the water, his eyes glowing with emerald light, reminiscent of the killing curse that had marked him as an infant. The sight was both unsettling and strangely fitting, as if his magic was finally manifesting its true nature. Whatever was happening to him, whatever changes were coming, Harry knew there was no turning back now. The path of knowledge he'd chosen had consequences he was only beginning to understand. The next morning dawned with an atmosphere of tension throughout Hogwarts. Ministry officials in formal robes patrolled the corridors, and a special desk had been set up in the Great Hall where students were queuing to have their wands examined. "This is outrageous," Hermione fumed as they watched Lavender Brown surrender her wand to a stern-faced Ministry witch. "They're treating students like criminal suspects." Harry nodded in agreement, though his attention was divided. Following Nott's instructions, he placed subtle magical dampening charms on himself and his wand before breakfast, spells designed to mask the unique signature of intent magic that might otherwise be detected. "Mr. Potter." Professor McGonagall's voice cut through his thoughts. She approached their table, her expression tight with concern. "A word, if you please." Harry followed her to a quiet corner of the hall, aware of curious glances from other students. "Your eyes, Potter," she said quietly. "They're different." Harry had already noticed the change in the mirror that morning. While no longer actively glowing, his green eyes now had a strange luminosity to them, as if lit from within. No spell he tried could disguise it completely. "It's nothing to worry about, Professor," he assured her, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Just a side effect of some advanced practice." McGonagall's lips thinned. "Potter, I've seen that particular side effect before. Many years ago, in another student who delved too deeply into magical arts beyond standard curriculum." Her voice dropped further. "Magical evolution is not to be taken lightly. Once begun, it cannot be reversed. Harry's curiosity piqued. Who was the other student? McGonagall hesitated, then replied, "Your mother." What? Harry stared at her in shock. My mother had this happen to her eyes? Not exactly the same, McGonagall clarified. But similar manifestations of magical adaptation. Lily Evans had an extraordinary intuitive understanding of magical theory. By her 7th year, she was designing spell work that should have been beyond her capabilities. A sad smile touched the professor's lips. She called it intention casting rather than the more archaic intent magic, but the principles were similar. Harry struggled to process this revelation. But she didn't have access to Slytherins. He stopped abruptly, realizing he'd nearly revealed too much. McGonagall raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Your mother found her own path to that knowledge, through sheer brilliance and determination. Which is precisely why I'm concerned for you, Potter. Such rapid advancement often comes at a cost. What kind of cost? Harry asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Balance, McGonagall said simply, unknowingly echoing the Guardian's warning. Magical evolution must be matched with emotional and mental stability. Otherwise. She didn't finish the thought. I understand, Professor, Harry said solemnly. I'm being careful. McGonagall studied him for a moment longer. I hope so, Potter. Now, about your wand examination, the headmaster has arranged for yours to be handled privately in his office, away from the spectacle here. 10 o'clock. Harry nodded his thanks, returning to his friends as McGonagall departed. This private arrangement was both concerning and helpful because it would keep him away from the more experienced ministry examiners, but concerning because it suggested Dumbledore suspected something specific about Harry's magical activities. What was that about? Ron asked as Harry sat back down. My wand examination is happening in Dumbledore's office, Harry replied quietly. And apparently my mother was into intent magic too. Hermione's eyes widened. Really? But how? Without Slytherin's library, I don't know, Harry admitted. But McGonagall said she developed similar abilities, similar changes. He gestured vaguely toward his eyes. That's actually encouraging, Hermione said thoughtfully. If your mother managed to balance these abilities without negative consequences, then maybe I can too, Harry finished. Let's hope. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance to the Great Hall. Students were crowding around the notice board where a new educational decree had been posted. Oh no, Hermione groaned as they pushed through to read it. This is getting worse. Educational Decree 29, all student gatherings of 3 or more outside of scheduled classes require ministry approval. Unauthorized meetings will result in immediate disciplinary action. By order of the Ministry of Magic. They're trying to prevent us from working together, Harry realized. They know something's happening at Hogwarts, but they don't know exactly what or who's involved. So they're restricting everyone, Ron said disgustedly. Brilliant strategy. Harry's gaze swept the hall, landing briefly on the Slytherin table where Daphne Greengrass was watching him with an inscrutable expression. Beside her, Theodore Nott gave an almost imperceptible nod. We need to accelerate our plans, Harry said quietly to Ron and Hermione. Whatever's in that underwater vault, we need to find it tonight. After my wand examination, he broke off as an unfamiliar sensation washed over him, a cold prickling at the base of his skull, accompanied by a strange pressure behind his eyes. Without thinking, Harry strengthened his mental shields using techniques from Slytherin's texts on mind magic. The pressure increased momentarily, then abruptly ceased. Harry? What's wrong? Hermione asked, noting his sudden tension. Harry scanned the hall again, this time with magical senses extended. There, at the staff table. A ministry official he hadn't noticed before was watching him with unusual intensity. Someone just tried to use legilimency on me, Harry murmured, keeping his expression neutral while his mind raced. That ministry wizard at the end of the staff table. Ron and Hermione didn't turn to look, maintaining admirably casual postures. Are you sure? Hermione whispered. Positive, Harry replied. My occlumency barriers caught it, another skill from Slytherin's library. What was he looking for? Ron asked. I don't know, Harry admitted. But it means they're getting more aggressive in their investigation. The morning bell rang, signaling the start of classes. As students began filing out of the hall, Harry noticed several ministry officials positioning themselves at strategic points throughout the castle. They're turning Hogwarts into a surveillance state, Hermione said bitterly as they headed toward Charms. Just like last year with Umbridge. Harry nodded grimly. And just like last year, we'll need to outmaneuver them. The wand examination in Dumbledore's office was less invasive than Harry had feared. A thin, scholarly-looking ministry wizard named Proudfoot performed a series of diagnostic spells on Harry's wand, recording the results on an official form. Phoenix feather core, holly wood, 11 inches, Proudfoot muttered as he worked. Interesting combination, Mr. Potter. Unusual, but not unprecedented. Harry remained silent, maintaining the magical dampening effect around himself and his wand as Nott had instructed. Dumbledore observed from behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Well, everything appears to be in order, Proudfoot concluded finally, handing the wand back to Harry. Standard magical signature, consistent with ministry-approved wand lore. No evidence of unauthorized casting patterns. Harry accepted his wand with a polite nod, carefully concealing his relief. Nott's countermeasures had worked perfectly. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Potter, Proudfoot said, gathering his equipment. The ministry appreciates your understanding during these necessary security procedures. After the examiner left, Dumbledore gestured for Harry to remain. A moment more, Harry, if you don't mind. Harry sat back down, mentally reinforcing his occlumency shields. While he trusted Dumbledore more than the ministry, he wasn't ready to share everything about Slytherin's library yet. Your eyes, Dumbledore began without preamble. They've changed. Harry nodded, seeing no point in denying the obvious. A side effect of my studies, I believe. Indeed. Dumbledore leaned forward, studying Harry with those piercing blue eyes. Magical evolution is a rare phenomenon, Harry. It typically occurs only in those with exceptional power who push beyond conventional limitations. Like my mother? Harry asked, testing McGonagall's revelation. A sad smile touched Dumbledore's lips. Yes. Lily was extraordinary in many ways. Her intuitive understanding of magic's fundamental nature allowed her to innovate spellwork that most considered impossible. He paused, then added, including the protection that saved you from Voldemort. Harry's interest sharpened. Her sacrifice, that was intent magic. The purest form, Dumbledore confirmed. Not dark, despite what the ministry might classify as unregulated. Magic driven by love, by the deepest, most primal intent to protect. His expression grew more serious. But such magic comes with risks, Harry. The changes you're experiencing are not merely cosmetic. They reflect a fundamental shift in how your body channels magical energy. I know, Harry said quietly. I've been researching it. Dumbledore nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Then you likely know that balance is crucial. Physical adaptation must be matched with emotional and mental stability. He leaned back in his chair. Which brings me to a request, or perhaps a suggestion. Sir. Allow Professor Snape to resume your occlumency lessons. Harry couldn't hide his immediate negative reaction. With respect, Headmaster, that didn't work out well last time. I'm aware, Dumbledore acknowledged. However, the situation has changed. Your increased magical sensitivity makes you more vulnerable to Voldemort's intrusions, not less. And Professor Snape, whatever his personal feelings toward you, understands the mental disciplines necessary for controlling advanced magical manifestations. Harry hesitated, considering the request. His own occlumency skills had improved dramatically through Slytherin's techniques, but having someone experienced to practice against might be valuable, especially with Voldemort potentially sensing his magical development. "I'll think about it," Harry said finally. Dumbledore accepted this with a nod. "One more thing, Harry. Whatever knowledge you've discovered, whatever source you're drawing from, be careful that you understand its context. History is written by the victors, and magical history is no exception. Even primary sources can present a narrow perspective." The warning was clear, if diplomatically phrased. Dumbledore suspected Harry was accessing knowledge connected to Slytherin and was cautioning against taking it at face value. "I understand, sir," Harry replied carefully. "I'm cross-referencing everything I learn." "Excellent," Dumbledore smiled. That approach would make Ravenclaw proud, if not Slytherin himself. Harry left the office with mixed feelings. The wand examination had gone smoothly, but Dumbledore's insights into his mother's magic and his warnings about balance reinforced the gravity of the path Harry was on. The changes weren't just affecting his magic, but his very being. The Hogsmeade visit that weekend came as a welcome break from the increasingly oppressive atmosphere at Hogwarts. Ministry officials had expanded their investigation beyond wand examinations to include monitoring of the library, restriction of certain spell books, and random questioning of students, particularly those who had been part of Dumbledore's army the previous year. "Finally, a day without someone breathing down our necks," Ron said cheerfully as they walked the path to the village, fresh spring air filling their lungs after weeks of castle confinement. "Don't get too comfortable," Hermione cautioned. "Look." She nodded toward the village entrance where two Aurors were checking student permission forms with unusual thoroughness. "They're even ruining Hogsmeade visits now," Ron grumbled. Harry remained quiet, his senses extended beyond normal perception. Since the incident in the chamber with Malfoy, his magical awareness had expanded dramatically. He could now feel the magical signatures of others around him, Hermione's organized, precise energy, Ron's warm, steady presence, the varied patterns of their classmates. More concerningly, he could sense something else, a wrongness at the edges of his perception, like a shadow where there should be light. Something, or someone, was disturbing the magical fabric around Hogsmeade. "Harry?" Hermione touched his arm, noting his distraction. "What's wrong?" "Not sure," he replied quietly. "Something doesn't feel right." They passed through the Auror checkpoint without incident and entered the busy main street of Hogsmeade. Students crowded the shops, enjoying their temporary freedom despite the heightened security. Harry led his friends toward the three broomsticks, still trying to pinpoint the source of his unease. As they passed Dervish and Banges, a familiar voice called his name. "Potter." "A word?" Daphne Greengrass stood in a narrow alley between shops, her expression urgent. Alone, without her usual Slytherin companions. Harry hesitated, then nodded to Ron and Hermione. "I'll catch up with you inside." "Harry," Hermione began worriedly. "It's fine," he assured her. "Just give me 5 minutes." Reluctantly, they continued toward the pub while Harry joined Daphne in the alley. "This isn't a good time for a chat, Greengrass," Harry said tersely. "Something's wrong in the village." "I know," she replied, surprising him. "That's why I stopped you. Death Eaters are coming." Harry stared at her. "How could you possibly? My sister overheard Malfoy talking to Crabbe in the common room," Daphne explained quickly. "Despite your memory charm, he managed to communicate enough to his father about finding powerful old magic at Hogwarts. The Dark Lord has ordered a strike team to capture students for questioning, specifically, anyone who might know what Draco discovered." The shadowy wrongness in Harry's perception suddenly made sense. "They're already here, aren't they? I can feel them." Daphne's eyes widened slightly. "You can sense magical signatures at that distance? You've progressed further than I thought." "Never mind that," Harry said urgently. "We need to warn everyone, get the students back to the castle." "That's the problem," Daphne replied. The Aurors at the village entrance are imposters, polyjuiced Death Eaters. They've already sealed the direct path back to Hogwarts with anti-transportation wards. Harry's mind raced, processing this information while extending his magical senses further, seeking confirmation. There, at the village boundaries, he could feel the distinctive magical signature of containment wards being established. Powerful ones. How do you know so much about their plans? He asked, sudden suspicion flaring. Because I've been expecting something like this, Daphne replied evenly. My family occupies a precarious position, Potter. Neutral in a conflict that increasingly demands choosing sides. I've made contingency plans for when that neutrality became untenable. She held his gaze steadily. Today is that day. Before Harry could respond, screams erupted from the main street. His decision made instantly, Harry sprinted toward the commotion, Daphne close behind. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Black-robed figures had appeared throughout the village, wands raised as they cast containment spells and fired stunning hexes at fleeing students. The false Aurors at the entrance had dropped their disguises, revealing Death Eater masks as they prevented escape. Get everyone into the buildings. Harry shouted to the panicking students. 3 broomsticks, honeydukes, anywhere with defensible space. He spotted Ron and Hermione already organizing younger students, directing them toward the pub where Madame Rosmerta was ushering people inside. A jet of red light shot toward a group of third years running for cover. Without thinking, Harry thrust out his hand, conjuring a shield of pure magical energy that absorbed the stunning spell completely. The Death Eater who had cast it froze momentarily in surprise, then sent a more lethal curse hurtling toward Harry. Instead of shielding again, Harry redirected the spell with a circular motion of his hand, sending it crashing into a nearby water barrel, which exploded in a shower of splinters and liquid. Potter, the Death Eater snarled, recognizing him despite the chaos. The Dark Lord wants you alive, but he didn't specify undamaged. 2 more Death Eaters joined the first, surrounding Harry with wands raised. He could feel their magical signatures, twisted, corrupted by dark magic and cruel intent. Last chance to surrender, one taunted, voice muffled behind the skull mask. Harry centered himself, connecting fully with his magical core as Slytherin's texts had taught him. Power flooded his system, and he knew without seeing that his eyes had begun to glow with that eerie emerald light. No, he said simply. Last chance for you to leave. They attacked simultaneously, 3 deadly curses converging on Harry from different angles. Time seemed to slow as his enhanced perception processed the threats. Drawing on techniques he'd mastered in the chamber, Harry created not a shield but a vortex of pure magical energy around himself. The curses hit the swirling barrier and were caught in its rotation, their energy absorbed and redirected upward in a brilliant flash of light that temporarily blinded everyone nearby. When vision returned, Harry stood unharmed at the center of a scorched circle on the cobblestones. The nearest Death Eater lay unconscious, thrown backward by the magical backlash. The other 2 stumbled in confusion, their wands smoking from magical feedback. What the hell are you? One whispered, fear evident even through the mask. Harry didn't answer. Extending both hands, he channeled his magic directly into the ground beneath their feet. The cobblestones liquefied momentarily before reforming as bonds around the Death Eater's ankles, trapping them in place. Around the village, more battles raged. Harry spotted Daphne Greengrass fighting alongside Neville and Luna, her elegant spellwork precise and devastating. Near Honeydukes, Professor McGonagall had arrived and was dueling 3 Death Eaters simultaneously, her transfiguration mastery turning the very environment against them. A scream drew Harry's attention to Hermione, who was defending a group of younger students while Ron lay stunned at her feet. A particularly large Death Eater advanced on her, deflecting her spells with practiced ease. Harry moved without conscious thought. One moment he stood amidst the trapped Death Eaters, the next he was beside Hermione, having covered the distance with a technique from Slytherin's most advanced texts, magical translocation, not quite apparition but a controlled shifting of one's magical essence through space. The Death Eater faltered at Harry's sudden appearance, especially as the full force of Harry's now undisguised magical aura hit him. Raw power emanated from Harry in visible waves, causing the air around him to shimmer like heat over summer pavement. "Potter," the Death Eater growled, recovering his composure. "The Dark Lord will be pleased when I deliver you." Harry recognized the voice with a jolt of hatred. "Dolohov. How's that chest wound Sirius gave you?" The Death Eater snarled and launched a vicious attack, the same purple flame curse that had injured Hermione in the Department of Mysteries. Instead of dodging or shielding, Harry reached out with his magical senses, feeling the structure of the curse as it approached. In a movement that felt as natural as breathing, he caught the spell with his bare hand. Hermione gasped as the purple flames swirled around Harry's fingers, contained by his will alone. For a moment, he held Dolohov's deadly magic, examining its construction with an almost academic interest. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent it back toward its caster with doubled intensity. Dolohov barely managed to dive aside, the redirected curse grazing his shoulder and tearing through his robes with a sizzling sound. He crashed into a market stall, sending fruit and vegetables flying in all directions. "How?" he began, struggling to his feet. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," Harry replied calmly. "Just forgotten knowledge." Dolohov's eyes narrowed behind his mask. "The old magic. So it's true, you found it." He raised his wand again, but his stance had changed from aggressive to defensive. The Dark Lord suspected, but couldn't confirm. Harry stepped forward, power gathering around him like a storm. "Tell your master that Slytherin's knowledge doesn't belong to him." It never did. Fear finally overcame Dolohov's aggression. With a crack that somehow penetrated the anti-apparition wards, he disappeared, leaving behind only the lingering scent of dark magic and singed fabric. Hermione stared at Harry, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "Harry, your magic, it's visible." Harry glanced down at himself, realizing she was right. A subtle aura of emerald energy surrounded him, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He took a deep breath, consciously reining in the power, drawing it back into his core as the Guardian had taught him. The aura faded, but not completely. Something had changed during this battle, a threshold crossed in his magical development. Around them, the tide of the skirmish had turned. With several Death Eaters down and Hogwarts professors arriving as reinforcements, the remaining attackers were retreating, disapparating through holes they tore in the village's wards. "Ron," Hermione reminded him, kneeling beside their friend who was beginning to stir. Harry placed a hand on Ron's chest, channeling healing energy directly into his system. Ron's eyes flew open, fully alert without the usual grogginess that followed enervation spells. "Bloody hell," he gasped, sitting up abruptly. "What did you just do to me?" "Magical energy transfer," Harry explained, offering a hand to help him up. "Faster than regular healing spells." Ron accepted the help, then stared at Harry with newfound wariness. "Your eyes are doing that glowing thing again. And you've got something like flames around you, mate." Harry nodded, not bothering to deny what was becoming increasingly obvious. "I know. It's getting harder to control." "Control what exactly?" McGonagall's voice came from behind them as the professor approached, her robes singed but her composure intact. "Mr. Potter, what have you done to yourself?" Before Harry could answer, Nott and Daphne approached from the other side, both looking battle-worn but exhilarated. "It's magical evolution, Professor," Nott explained calmly. "Potter's magical channels are adapting to accommodate increased power flow." "I'm well aware of what it is, Mr. Nott," McGonagall replied sharply. "What concerns me is the rate of progression. Such changes typically occur gradually over years of dedicated practice." She turned back to Harry. "You've accelerated a dangerous process, Potter." "I didn't exactly have a choice," Harry said, gesturing around at the battle-damaged village. "Voldemort isn't giving me years to prepare." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "No, I suppose he isn't. But there are reasons the old ways of magical instruction were modified, Potter. Reasons beyond ministry control or standardized education. Because not everyone could handle the power, Daphne interjected quietly. Because for some, the physical and mental changes became overwhelming. A chill ran through Harry at her words. What happens when someone can't handle it? Their magic consumes them, not replied matter-of-factly. Literally. The body breaks down under the strain of channeling too much raw power. That's enough, Mr. Knott, McGonagall cut in sharply. This is not the time or place for such discussions. She surveyed the village, where Aurors, real ones this time, were beginning to arrive. All students are to return to the castle immediately. The ministry will have questions about today's events. As if summoned by her words, a familiar figure in ministry robes appeared, flanked by Aurors. Rufus Scrimgeour surveyed the scene with his yellowish eyes, his gaze eventually landing on Harry and the faint magical aura still visible around him. Potter, the minister said grimly. I believe we need to have another conversation. The aftermath of what the Daily Prophet quickly dubbed the Battle of Hogsmeade was swift and severe. The ministry escalated its presence at Hogwarts, stationing Aurors at key locations throughout the castle and implementing even stricter educational decrees. Harry faced an intense interrogation in Dumbledore's office, with both the Minister and Department of Magical Law Enforcement officials present. Only Dumbledore's intervention prevented them from detaining Harry for examination at the Ministry itself. The boy acted in self-defense, Dumbledore had stated firmly. And likely saved numerous lives through his actions. That's not the issue, Albus, Scrimgeour had countered. The issue is the nature of the magic he used. Witnesses describe impossible feats, catching curses with bare hands, moving instantaneously across distances, manipulating stone with a thought. His gaze had fixed accusingly on Harry. Magic that hasn't been seen in centuries. Restricted magic. In the end, they couldn't prove Harry had accessed forbidden knowledge, only that he had displayed unusual magical abilities. Without concrete evidence of wrongdoing, they were forced to release him with a warning, and the promise of continued monitoring. Now, 3 days after the attack, Harry sat by the lake with Ron, Hermione, and, unexpectedly, Daphne Greengrass and Theodore Knott. Their unlikely alliance had solidified during the battle, with Daphne's warning and Knott's combat support earning a measure of trust from the Gryffindor trio. They've sealed off the second-floor girls' bathroom, Hermione reported quietly. Aurors stationed there around the clock. They suspect but can't confirm, Knott observed. Classic ministry overreach. They also confiscated my green journal, Daphne added. The one with my great-grandmother's notes that I lent you, Potter. Harry nodded grimly. They're gathering evidence, trying to piece together what I've found. What we've found, Hermione corrected gently. You're not alone in this, Harry. Which brings us to the problem at hand, Ron interjected. If we can't access the chamber directly, how do we reach Slytherin's library? Or that underwater vault you mentioned? There might be another way in, Harry said thoughtfully. Remember in second year, when the chamber opened? Ron and I got in through a collapsed section of tunnel in Myrtle's bathroom, but that wasn't the only pipe connected to the chamber. The plumbing system, Hermione realized. Slytherin built the chamber long before modern plumbing, but when it was installed centuries later. They had to work around the existing structures, not finished, looking impressed. Including the massive pipe network connected to the chamber. So we find another entrance through the plumbing, Daphne summarized. But where? Harry pulled out the Marauder's map, activating it with a tap of his wand. I've been studying this, looking for patterns. There's a section of the dungeons, near the Slytherin common room but not quite part of it, where the map shows strange inconsistencies, similar to what I noticed around the chamber entrance. Knott studied the indicated area with interest. That's the old ceremonial bath chamber. It hasn't been used in centuries, supposedly flooded and sealed off during Rowena Ravenclaw's time. A convenient story to keep people away from another entrance, Daphne suggested. Harry nodded. Exactly what I was thinking. If we can access that chamber, we might find a way into the main chamber system, Hermione concluded. It's worth investigating. Tonight, then, Harry decided. After curfew. The Aurors are focusing their patrols on the upper floors where they think students might be holding secret meetings. I can get us into that section of the dungeons without being seen, not offered. There are passages only Slytherins know about. Convenient, Ron muttered, still not entirely trusting their new allies. Necessary, Daphne corrected coolly. Slytherin House exists in the dungeons for a reason, Weasley. The original entrance to Salazar's quarters was there before the chamber itself was constructed. As they finalized their plans, Harry's attention drifted momentarily, his enhanced senses detecting a disturbance in the magical atmosphere around the castle. It was subtle but unmistakable. Someone powerful was probing Hogwarts' outer defenses, testing for weaknesses. Harry. Hermione touched his arm, noting his sudden distraction. What's wrong? Voldemort, Harry said quietly, certainty filling him. He's testing the boundaries. Not tensed visibly. You can sense the Dark Lord's magic. From here. Harry nodded, focusing on the distant sensation. It's distinctive. Corrupted but powerful. He's looking for a way in. The attack on Hogsmeade was just a probe, Daphne realized. A test of defenses and an attempt to capture informants. And now he knows what I can do, Harry said grimly. Which means we're running out of time. The 5 students exchanged somber glances, the weight of their situation settling over them. What had begun as Harry's private discovery had escalated into something much larger, a race to master ancient knowledge before Voldemort could claim it for himself. We need that underwater vault, Harry said with newfound determination. Whatever artifacts Slytherin stored there, they might be our only advantage if Voldemort breaches the castle defenses. As they rose to return to the castle, the setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds. Harry felt the subtle magic of Hogwarts responding to his awareness, the ancient stones resonating with energies similar to what he'd been learning to channel. The castle itself seemed to be waking to a threat it hadn't faced in centuries. Tonight would determine whether they could access the knowledge they needed, and whether Harry could master the next phase of his magical evolution before it consumed him entirely. Something went wrong with this response, please try again. Take the plot into the next chapter. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.